more.
Welcome back to Co-Work Radio. I'm Jane Walker-Wood.
And I'm Catherine Raymond.
And we are here with UCSB professor and prolific business author John Greathouse. Please email him your questions at askjohn@coworkradio.com and listen to him on our website, iTunes, iHeart, and YouTube. How are you doing, John?
Awesome.
Hey, John, we have a question from Kalu.
Ooh.
And
is that how she pronounces her name?
It's a he.
I like that name.
It's a he.
Oh, Kalu.
Sorry, Kalu.
He wants to know, how does a company turn their lease into a money-making? Because he read an article that you wrote about Citrix, and he says he's not sure how to approach his landlord.
So, just as a backstory and get some context, the Citrix, which is a company that I used to be associated with, they were coming into a very large building, and they knew that once they leased that building, the intrinsic value of the building would go up just because of their anchor tenant and they're stable, et cetera. And they knew that the improvements they were going to make, the leasehold improvements, would also increase the value of the building. So they went to the landlord and they said, look, we love this building, we're committed to moving in, but we think we are going to increase the value of the building. So if you sell the building within 10 years or something of us leaving, we want to share in the upside value increase of the building. And they were able to negotiate that. The building was subsequently sold, and they made a lot of money. And I think it was a fair exchange because they did increase the value of the building, and the landlord recognized that. That's not going to work, obviously, for every startup. You can't walk in as a 5-person company.
I normally think of an anchor tenant as being something that's going to be a draw for people.
Yeah.
Such as if you put a Saks, if people are going to come shop at Saks. But,
well, this was a tech like a tech center.
So, okay.
So knowing that, I didn't make that clear. So knowing that Citrix was in
that
this,
wouldn't work on the local Macy's mall.
No. Yeah. So, but I think there is a lesson we can take from that. So even if you're a 5-person company, you may not be able to bully your landlord into, helping you in that regard. But there's a nice message here that I like to share with my students. Excuse me, and that's playing long ball. So what I mean by long ball is look at your negotiations not as 1 or 2 or 3 years, but look at them as many, many years out, and ask for something that the other person can freely give because it costs them nothing. So that landlord, if that building hadn't sold, or if it hadn't sold for an appreciable amount more, really wasn't out anything. Citrix wasn't saying pay me, because they were just saying if it sells, and if it sells for more, we want to share.
Now, what if you're also in a lease? Because I know right now in Santa Barbara and Montecito that business has been slower since the mudslides. Can you go to your landlord and renegotiate that lease? Now, how do you do that?
That's something that
because I've talked to a lot of business people, and they're not even getting a deduction on the months they were out of their property.
So you can renegotiate everything. So in the dot bomb of 2001, we were in some really bad agreements that made sense before those crash. It didn't make sense afterwards. I picked up the phone and I said, hey, look, this isn't working for us, and there's no way we can continue to pay you. And we got out of those agreements. Now, we did it in the right way. We did it in a stand-up way. We didn't just renege. We renegotiated them. So I think being upfront and communicating with your landlord and saying, would you rather me go out of business and you get nothing from me?
That's a good point.
Or would you rather me stay in business and get something from me? And then when I come out of this recession or, this retail conversion that we're in right now, I will still be here for you. Or you can have an empty storefront.
Well, yeah, some of the store owners I've talked to, they've said, well, I can't renegotiate because it would cost me so much to move, because maybe they're a restaurant and they'd have to set that up again. Or
but what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
So what do you have to lose if you go up to somebody and you say, hey, I want to renegotiate my contract? What do you have to lose?
Yeah, if they say
no. The worst they say
is no. So speaking of empty storefronts, do you have any ideas, opinions about what's going on in downtown Santa Barbara? And, obviously no easy fix.
There isn't an easy fix. I think it's really going to require – what's happening is happening all over the country, all over the world, and that's retail shifting. We sort of predicted it in 2000. It didn't happen right away, but we predicted it that that everything was going to move online that made sense to move online. That doesn't mean everything will be online. Some things you're not going to buy a washer and dryer necessarily online, but things that make sense to move online will, and they have. So I don't think you want to fight that battle. I think you want to try to put yourself in. We should, if you're going into retail, make sure you're you're going into a retail that Amazon just can't take away from you. So you need to be adding some sort of service component that is hands-on and not, again, something.
Yeah, some businesses, I mean, if you go into Sephora, they're still packed because, women cannot try their lipstick online, but with holographs, that's the future. I was reading an interesting article this week that in 100 years ago, they were fighting something similar because the catalog was invented.
I had not thought that.
Yeah, there was a little comic that somebody put in a paper where the guy comes into the shoe store and he's like, "Oh, my feet are killing me. I bought these at a catalog and I should have come here." That's how they were fighting it then.
That's actually a fantastic analogy because it's wholly applicable. It's not new. I mean, this kind of disruption feels really new to us, but it's not. Another one you could cite is specialty stores. So we had the Woolworths and the JCPenney's and the Five and Dimes, and then all of a sudden, specialty stores came in and they sold just one line of goods better than a Woolworth and those companies went away because they couldn't. They had this bland kind of collection of product, and somebody that was only selling home goods or only selling electronics could do it better.
Or another one, I don't know if you've seen the TV series on Netflix, Selfridges, where Mr. Selfridge came to England and he actually had the women's clothes and gloves on display because before then you went up to the counter and you said, "Oh, I'd like to see some black gloves," and they brought out the box and he had everything out. And I mean, a real disruptor.
Forward thinking. Well, one of the businesses, of course, and I'd be remiss not to say it, they also happen to be one of our large sponsors, is Impact Hub. I mean, just opening their third building here in Santa Barbara. So that co-working model is something that is taking over some of the retail spaces and doing very well.
Well, and what's interesting and what they're doing really well in is they have small little offices that people rent. So not just the people with the, a chair floating, but a lot of people are renting small offices.
It's a great resource. I had a meeting there on Thursday of last week. So, there's a group that I'm in, and we meet there once a month, and it works out really well. It's very centralized. I've talked to other people in town about how can the high-tech community kind of step up and absorb some of that retail space. Part of the underlying problem is some of that space is owned by third-generation people in town that aren't really motivated.
And they're not negotiating, getting back to they won't negotiate.
And I think they're going to be forced to negotiate. So we'll see how long it takes. But at some point when the building is empty, the building is empty.
You would think that would be hurting somebody, you would think. The building empty. But
I wish I had that problem.
We'll solve all of them next week. Yes. John, thank you so much for being here. We do appreciate it. If you'd like to get your question into John, please go to our website at coworkerradio.com. You're listening to KZSB 1290 AM. Thanks for being here, John.
Yeah.